Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, on Thursday night in the Pac-12, there's a game with the Utah Utes traveling on the road at the Washington State Cougars. Who do I think is going to win this game? Let's break it down. Now, Utah is 5-2 and 3-1 in the Pac-12 to start this season, and Kyle Whittingham is the longest tenured head coach in college football besides Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. And he has done great things at Utah. He has always done more with less, and he has done more with less this season. They started their season with a loss at Florida, 29-26, however, and this was a game that they could have won, but Cameron Rising, their star quarterback, threw a pick at the end of the game. But then they beat Southern Utah 73-7. That was a good win. And then they beat San Diego State 35-7. And obviously San Diego State is a decent group of five. And then they won at Arizona State 34-13. And that was a good win because it's on the road at a Pac-12 school. And then they beat Oregon State 42-16. But then they had a tough loss at UCLA 42-32. This was a game that they were not playing up to their standards. Utah really struggled on the road in this one. But then they bounced back and beat USC 43-42 at home. And this was a fantastic win for Utah. And quarterback Cameron Rising had 415 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he had 60 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns for Utah against USC. He played fantastic, his best performance of the season. And when Cameron Rising is playing at this high of a level, he is a NFL talented type quarterback, and he can really do some special things for Utah. But he hasn't played like this all season, but in this game he did. Running back Micah Bernard at 37 yards and a touchdown, and running back Tavian Thomas at 28 yards. For Utah against USC, both are really talented running backs. They obviously did not have too many yards in this game because they focused more on the passing game. Utah did, but they still are very talented running backs. Tight end Dalton Kincaid at 234 yards and a touchdown. That is insane for a tight end to have 234 yards receiving in a game. He is fantastic, and he's having to step up even more since Brent Keithy is out at tight end for the season, injured for Utah. So Dalton Kincaid is doing fantastic, and he will be in the NFL. And wide receiver Devon Vele had 62 yards and a touchdown for Utah, and Utah's got a great offense when they are clicking, and if they continue to play like they did against USC, then they will win a lot of games this season. And on the defensive side of the ball, safety RJ Hoover at 8 tackles, defensive end Gabe Reed at 2 tackles, and linebacker Kareem Reed at 4 tackles for Utah against USC. Utah's defense is really talented, but they have struggled at times this season to defend, but when they are on, their defense is really good. Now on the Washington State side, they are 4-3 and 1-3 in the Pac-12 this season, and Jake Dickert has done a good job to replace Nick Rolovich at head coach at Washington State. They are improved on both sides of the ball, Washington State is this season, but they still have a long way to go to get into the upper tier of the Pac-12. They did beat Idaho in week 1 24-17, and that was a good win because Idaho is a much improved FCS program. And then they won at Wisconsin 17-14, and although Wisconsin is not as good this season as they have been in the past, that was still a good win for Washington State. Then they beat Colorado State 38-7. That was a good win. But then they lost to Oregon 44-41 at home. This was a big loss for Washington State because they had this game, but Bo Nix went on down the field and won the game for Oregon, and it was a tough loss for Washington State, but it was a good performance overall. Then they beat California 28-9. That was a good win. California is struggling. But then they lost at USC 30-14. That was a tough loss. They tried in this game, but they really weren't too competitive. And then they lost at Oregon State 24-10 in a game that a lot more people, including myself, thought Washington State could win, possibly, but they did not play well in this game. And in the Oregon State game, quarterback Cameron Ward at 345 yards, a touchdown, and interception. He is the transfer quarterback from FCS program Incarnate Word, and he has been solid for Washington State this season. He is really talented, and he does have a potential NFL future, but he can be turnover prone, and he is still adjusting to the FBS level. If he can completely adjust to the FBS level, I think Cameron Ward will be fantastic for Washington State. Running back Jalen Jenkins at 42 yards and 30 receiving yards and a touchdown. Washington State needs to run the football more because he is a talented running back, but Washington State has struggled to run the ball this season, and they do focus more on the passing game. Wide receiver Robert Farrell at 131 yards, wide receiver Leighton Smithson at 62 yards, and wide receiver Deshaun Stribling at 45 yards for Washington State against Oregon State. All are talented receivers, and Washington State does have a pretty good offense when they are clicking. And on the defensive side of the ball, defensive back Jordan Lee had 5 tackles, linebacker Ron Stone Jr. 4 tackles, and linebacker Travion Brown had a tackle against Oregon State. Washington State's defense has been pretty decent this season at times. Outside of the Oregon game and the USC games, they've been pretty solid, but obviously those were their 2 toughest opponents on the schedule. So who do I think is going to win this game? This game is very interesting because Utah is a much better football team at home. When they go on the road, they do struggle. And Washington State is the same way. When they go on the road, they really struggle, but they are a much better team at home. And this game is at Washington State, and that helps Washington State out big time in this game, because if it was at Utah, it'd be very tough for them to go on the road and win at Utah. But since it's at home, I think Washington State has a really good chance to win. But I'm going to go with Utah to beat Washington State 31-28. I think Washington State can win this game, but I think Utah has more talent than Washington State at this time. They have a really experienced team, and Kyle Whittingham, being an experienced head coach over his team at Utah, he has had Utah playing some of the best football in the country recently, and I think Washington State is an improving football team, but I don't think Jake Dickert has his team there just yet. They are improving on both sides of the ball in offense and defense, but I think Washington State has another year or two to go to start to get to the upper tier of the Pac-12, and I think Utah has a better team than Washington State at this time, and even though Utah does struggle on the road, I think Utah is going to squeak by Washington State and get the win 31-28. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below whether you think Utah or Washington State is going to win this game and why. And I will see you next time.